are the Men in Black.
Men in Black International. Now, I could see huge potential with this movie, or at least this franchise. For me, it was very much kind of a combination between Ghostbusters and Get Smart. However, there are quite a few things that could be fixed in this film, or at least altered in this film to make it an even better cinematic experience.
I think that there is a lot of fluff in this movie that they kind of focused on, like, cool different parts of the story, but didn't explain it all, or they didn't put a lot of substance to those types of things. So it kind of felt like it was just going through the motions, and you're just watching it and you're like, okay. And they focused on certain, like, strengths of things rather than like, okay, we'll focus on the strength and maybe elongate it to kind of flesh it out. But instead they're like, strength, okay, let's move on. Strength, okay, let's move on. Strength, let's move on. So,
you see that very quick movement with Tessa Thompson's character as well, is that they just fly and jump into it. There's no training aspect. I did feel like Agent J in the first Men in Black got more of an experience into the world of Men in Black, but at the same time I do feel like we've done that already. We don't need to do it with her. But it is quite apparent when they fast forward through that entire learning period where she just kind of is an expert already at the job. So I get it. And they do kind of just easily explain it to add that start origin to her character.
Right, and they like you said before, they do kind of show you a little bit what she's been kind of going through to get to that point.
Of course. So they it's kind of like the highlights of let's get there, now we jump into the story. The antagonists of this movie, definitely not as much depth as what you got, of course, with Vincent D'Onofrio's Edgar. However, they've got all style, no substance really. They're just kind of a part of the story instead of actually having a big influence on the story.
Yeah, it almost kind of felt a little bit like in the second movie where you had that villain, but she wasn't...
Laura Flynn Boyle?
Yeah, when she wasn't really... I guess she was forgettable.
Of course.
And so there are certain times in this story where they kind of want to do like misdirection to you.
Right.
And they do it. But then it kind of felt flat.
It's at the cost of the character depth as well.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to really learn about the characters if you're so much worried about the twists and turns of the story. And I do feel like they focus more on the twists and turns versus some of the elements of the characters in the story. Now, F. Gary Gray, we know he can do some amazing work. Now, if I feel like they put more effort into the action sequences, for instance, if it's going to be a spy thriller type film, you're going to want to invest in that heavily if you're going to build a franchise, $1 billion a year franchise. Now, when it comes to the comedy aspect too, it feels borderline spoofy. It's funny, you kind of laugh at it because it is more of the lower end of comedy in terms of not being that smart.
Yeah.
It's dumb laughs. But granted, I do compare it with the 2016 Ghostbusters. Above it, but still below the other levels of comedy that you would get. And that's why I kind of warranted to Get Smart, because it wasn't full-on spoof, but there was plenty of spoof in there, and there's a place for it. But man, if they beefed up the intelligent comedy and put it in with the action set pieces and choreography for fight scenes, they could dominate with this Men in Black franchise.
They can make it more, because they are agents. They are these secret agents that go out and protect it, just on a level of more extraterrestrial.
Of course.
So why not have like that, like you said, that Mission Impossible type feel when it comes to the action stuff and like the gadgets that they use.
Of course.
But then also add on top of that extra level of paranormal, extraterrestrial type feeling to it.
100%.
And of course, you know, you have your creatures and everything, so that is where you kind of want to go to, and that would be amazing. You know, you have that, but then you want to build that foundation first, and then put on top of it. And the one movie that comes to mind when I think of that is Winter Soldier. So they built a movie first.
Of course,
it just added Captain America into it.
Yep. And it did end up having a world to grow into, and I feel like this could definitely get a world to grow into, because the world I love, the story I love. It's pure Men in Black, the TV series, the comic series, and of course the movies. Like, let's get into that world, let's bring it up to the standards that it needs to be, and you could just do that with the action set pieces and the comedy.
And I feel like they need to have more trust in the audience.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that was one of the things too, like they're like, okay, what can we do to make it seem like it's like a good funny thing that they can kind of understand.
Of course.
And they need to like kind of branch out of that too. Like if you make it, we'll come.
Yeah, because it ended up being very predictable
Right.
at that as well. So I mean, they feel like they're trying to put in twists and turns, but you kind of predict what's going to happen before it happens. But I still enjoyed myself, even though I knew what was coming.
I will say that Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth
Of
were
course.
amazing. I think that they have good chemistry between each other. Granted, we've already seen that chemistry in Thor Ragnarok, but that would be kind of amazing to see those two characters themselves were really great.
Having
together.
there
I
you go.
love that Emma Thompson came back, that kind of like that bridge a little bit, of course, and then Danny Elfman coming back for the music.
Perfect on all levels in terms of bringing the music. If you're going to do a reboot within the same world, which is becoming more of a thing recently, versus an all-out just remake, if it's a continuation of the story, man, bringing Danny Elfman in to do the music. I mean, I remember going to Best Buy to buy the soundtrack of Men in Black, and everybody kept pointing me to the one with the words, and I was like, no, I want the score, which I said right when I walked in. And they were confused as the fact that I was purchasing the score by Danny Elfman.
You mean
for
the ones
Men in
without the
Black.
words?
Yeah, and that's what the employee said, the ones without the words. Like, yes, it's the compositions, but Men in Black was popping back then with Will Smith's song, and so for me it was like I understood why there was a little bit of bafflement when it came to me buying that. The score is absolutely one of my favorite scores, but from Danny Elfman. So for them to put it back in this movie with him and another counterpart, it felt like the world, and that's how you get me in there. That's how you bring me back, because I was in it the whole way, just with criticisms on certain aspects. But all in all, because of that, I would give it a 4. Because I feel like they could get higher if they put more investment into those things I talked about. However, I cannot give it more than a 4. If I rated it on just a normal movie, it would be a 3.5. But because it has that connective tissue to things that I absolutely love, a 4 for me for Men in Black International.
I give it a solid 3 because it was kind of like, it has some awesome elements to it, but you can definitely build more on top of it. Plus, I really love Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth, so that was a good pair. So solid 3.
3.0. Yeah. So with that though, I'm telling you that Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth could handle the work you throw at them. If you want to beef this up into a badass epic spy intergalactic kegger, that would be fantastic. But all in all, what did you guys think if you saw it? Tell us down in the comments below. If you didn't see it, I mean, I would recommend it for anybody who's a fan of Men in Black of any aspect. Go check it out. But either way, you can like and subscribe.
And did a thing on our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram startup.
All the social networking joints, you know where they are. Kicking to the party, feel the party, keep the party going on our Patreon. Gets us where we need to go. Check out all the reactions we just did from E3 as well as Dr. Sleep, available on our channel now. Thank you guys so much. And as always, now it's time to say goodbye.
And this party's over. And if you look right here,
well, I don't have my glasses on.